This is the UX Ladder, Conversations Beyond Pixels, a deep dive into product cultures, inclusion, and the untold stories that shape experiences and trends. Hey, Sharona. Welcome to the UX Ladder. I've been really looking forward to sitting down with you. How's it going? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, let's first properly introduce you. All right, whoever's listening, watching, I'm thrilled to introduce somebody who brings creativity into literally everything she does, Sharona Oshana. Sharona, you're a lead designer at Google currently within Search UX with a focus on food and lodging within search. Side note, I have so many questions because I've more and more started using Google search for food versus any of the other products. So thank you for that. And you're a visual and UX designer. I also know that you're a talented painter who has dabbled in leatherwork. And what I find really fascinating about you is that you see art in the most unexpected places. Like, for example, you've seen art in a crushed New York coffee cup on the sidewalk. At the same time, there is conventional cuteness that really turns you off. I have heard that cute puppies turn you completely off. And to me, that's fascinating. You're an artist and illustrator, and you've had quite a few different creative pursuits over time. For instance, I found that you had collaborated with ThereThere.com to create a shirt that really connects with the San Jose community. So my first question for you is, can you tell us more about that? Because I was reading up a little, but I wanted to hear it straight from you.
About the There
Yeah,
collaboration.
the shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I was living in San Jose at the time, and I knew another person who worked at Oaklandish because there was a subsidiary of Oaklandish, and they wanted to create connections with like other cities around the Bay Area, and a person who I knew at Oaklandish reached out to me about doing a San Jose themed design. So I designed a bicycle with had a heart as its frame with like SJ in the middle of it. And the reason for the bicycle is that at the time, bike party was a really big aspect of the culture in San Jose, and biking around was a big part of my life in San Jose. So it was a lot of what we did with our friends and how we would meet up and our main mode of transportation. So that was really where that was inspired from.
I love that. And I love how you talk about community because clearly you drew a lot of inspiration from something that was at the heart of your that your sort of like day to day community as well. And I also learned when I was doing all the things that you taught yourself photography at I think 13, 12 or 13, something like that. Tell me more. What led you to taking photos, and do you still roam around taking photos?
Yeah, wow, you did digging. Yeah, I got interested in darkroom photography at a really young age from a summer class, I must have been in middle school or high school. I did like a summer class at DVC, which is like a community college. Um, and it was a specifically just darkroom class with like you would lay objects on photosensitive paper and then expose them to light and see what you came up with through the bath process. And that was pre camera. And then once I did that class, I understood the dark room a little bit better and then got into film photography more in high school and would take film photography classes at the community center, learned how to use the dark room in high school, and then also at the same time got into digital photography and started learning Photoshop really young too. So by the time I got to college, I think I was like one of the last years at the university that had darkroom photography while they were like still transferring to digital. And so I had this like
Mm.
fun, I was in this fun place where I kind of knew both. And so I was like teetering both of these little worlds where like the professors, most of the people in the class like had never done darkroom photography. And since I'd been doing it for much longer than other students, they sort of just were like, "Go ask Sharona your questions." So I
Amazing.
sort of became like an interim TA, and that was really funny. But yeah, it was like, yeah, I started doing photography really young. Thought it was going to be my major. Wanted it to be my major in college, and was my parents negotiated it out of me, and so it was
Oh,
my minor. They didn't think that photography was a strong enough major, and so they tried to convince me to kind of at least find a different route, um,
yeah,
and that became design. But that was
got
also
it.
like a whole other negotiation with them as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna pin on that for just a second because I do have more questions about just that. Um, so you've dabbled in a lot of different career pursuits, and I know that you're a painter as well. What's your go-to medium these days?
Um, Painting came up in the last few years. That's sort of taken a pause right now because of my limited space. But it's something that I've always wanted to get into. I don't feel like I'm have this strong enough skills in it, and I know the medium well enough. When I started painting, I started using just acrylics because it was the easiest, cheapest thing to use, and getting into oils
Right.
starts getting like really complicated. I know that in college, I remember trying oils in university, and it was very tough for me. Um, but in the last like few years, yeah, I just started like using acrylics just to kind of like get accustomed to the textures and try to find subject matters that I liked without spending like too much financial investment in it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I'm still navigating what my subject matter might be, and it's very like an abstract at this point.
Mm.
It
So
could
would
take
you say, I see, I see.
yeah.
Is there anything you're working on right now?
Nothing at the moment painting wise. Um, yeah, I have very limited space in New York, so
I feel that. So let's go back to what we were just talking about a few minutes, and thank you for sharing that. Um, your design journey. So it sounds like you were interested in just the creative field or thinking about photography. Would you say your design journey then really began in college then?
it began in high school. Um,
Okay.
so as I said before, I started learning Photoshop in high school. Um, I think I BitTorrented Photoshop illegally. And
Amazing.
I don't shh, and started figuring out like how to use the tool. It was very rough beginning. Um, and I also like knew a lot of bands, like high school bands, punk bands or rock bands and stuff in high school. And so I would kind of dabble in making little flyers or things for them or doing photo shoots for them for like promos. Um, and I have a very like vivid memory of one day very close friend of mine, we were going to the city. We were like maybe junior or high school or senior year of high school, and we were going to San Francisco, and she was like, "Oh, let's stop by my friend's mom's workplace to like say hi or whatever," which was a very odd thing to do in high school. And I was like, "Okay," and we stopped at this office building, and it was an ad agency. I don't remember what agency it was. Um, and we went inside and we walked around, and it was like, and all I could see was like prints, board after board of vision boards, prints. It was like a very traditional ad agency. Um, and I was like just astounded. I was like, this is amazing. I want to work here, like a place like this. This is where I want to work. And that kind of piqued my interest in design. Uh, and to the kind of push of a counselor at school, like a guidance counselor, and my parents, I decided that design or graphic design was probably going to be my major. I feel very lucky that like at even that young age, I kind of like knew what
Yeah.
sort of career direction or at least creative direction I wanted to go into.
Yeah.
Um, but it was good.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really inspiring, that even at that age, you had the access to go in and see something like that. And um, because it's really powerful, right? It clearly left a really big impression on you.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the comments about your parents. Now, the creative industry in general isn't traditionally a field POC parents think about, right? Like, for instance, um, I think my mom pretty much only understood graphic design because I could say like, here's a poster. This is what you do with graphic design. But as design has filed, because when I went to school and when you went to school, it was just design. There weren't really many specialized lanes, and you did all the things. Um, so did your parents have different expectations then of your career journey?
Yeah, I think when I started going to university, design was still in very much in the arts department. It was in the same building as the painting majors and
Yeah.
sculptural majors and drawing and animation and stuff like that. So it was still very much in the arts. And then at my university specifically, they taught like kind of the Bauhaus method of design, which was very visually forward. Um, Emphasis, poster design, typography design, layout, things like that. Things that were more print oriented with
Hmm.
very small dabbles in digital um, teachings. But there wasn't really like a UX class or whatever. They
Yeah.
mostly were teaching us like how to use Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign. Um, but it was mostly just like for the purposes of how do you lay out an informational poster, mostly the projects like that. So,
Yeah.
and they weren't really like group oriented projects either. They're very
Oh, interesting.
individual projects. So that was interesting. My
Um,
parents, I think understood design to be just an art major.
yeah, yeah. I was the same, in which, when I graduated, it was in the design school, and that there were artists and sculptures and paintings all around. And I had this professor who I still stay in touch with, and something that he used to say a lot is that, well, I've never drawn anything in my life. I'm a designer, not an artist, but I still get asked to do certain things. Like, I know, for example, that you're an illustrator as well. I am not an illustrator, but it's like very easy for those to get confused. How did you? I mean, when you said, "Hey, I'm doing design as my major and photography as my minor," was there pushback? What was that like for you?
I think they kind of didn't really understand the career that it would go like where I would fall what I would fall into, and I think that was probably more scary for them, and that made them nervous because they couldn't really see a path of, like, you graduate university and then you get what job? Whereas, like, most other jobs or most other, um, degrees, there is a clearer path.
Yeah,
Design was very abstract to them, and I think even at the time, like right now, if someone said like, "Oh, I'm learning design," there's a much clearer path to parents. Like, what does that mean? What kind of jobs could they get? But when I was in school, it was very um, unspecific. It was very unspecific. Even in like tech at the time, there wasn't a lot of design roles, and it was
yeah,
like kind of at this perfect turn of the times where tech companies started taking design seriously. So as I was
yeah,
graduating, UX design and interaction design and all this stuff started becoming more valued by technology companies. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, but
What?
they just sort of were, were like, "What are you gonna do when you graduate? What job are you gonna get?"
Well, good for you for sticking with it, right? Because it is hard to stick to your path when there's like this voice surrounding you and saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It's added stress.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like, yeah, I was very lucky enough to kinda know what I wanted to do, with my life, and I
Yeah.
sort of made um, peace with like if I don't have to make a lot of money, but at least I'll be doing what I love, and that's okay enough for me. And even in university, I sort of made peace with that. Like if I can't get a fancy job or whatever, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a lawyer. So I'm not going to be making whatever X amount of money. That's okay with me. But you know,
Yeah. It's real though, right? Like my mom, for example, still tells my brother and me, because my sister, she went to school for economics, which she did nothing with, but she still went to school for economics. But my brother and I, I went to design school. He did marketing, and to date, my mom said like, you should have done a more useful degree. So I feel the same. So okay, you obviously graduated, you experienced a lot of things in school. What was your first UX job, and were you good at it?
um, I had a few small internships after university. My first job was at a very small startup in Fremont, and I was given a very fancy role as like I don't even remember what it was like creative marketing director or something like that, but it was like a 10-person company and I was in charge of the designing the packages for our products and uh, print ads and digital ads and things like that. I was not very good at it. Um, not good. Very cringy, but it was a good place to kind of get started and figure things out. And my second role, I took like a very big risk. Um, and an agency in San Francisco was had openings for freelance production designers, which I don't know if you remember, like really like menial work. Like it's I don't know if I could say like it's very bitch worky. Um,
Yeah, I've done production. Yes.
um, and I still felt like I was like really I was given at the like job that I had at this small startup, I was given this like very robust title that like I did not fit. It did not I wasn't learning a lot. There was no one to learn from.
Mm,
Um, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll take the risk and take on and apply for this role as freelance. So there's no guarantee I'm gonna get a job.
mm,
Um, it's temporary, and I'm gonna leave my stable job to go do this. Uh, but it was turned out to be a very good learning experience. It was a 3-month contract. I came in, I got my foot in the door, I met the other people, um, and it was a much bigger agency, and I could learn from other people. And they hired me on full time as a junior designer.
that's
Uh,
amazing.
ended up staying there for about 6 years, and it was like a
Wow.
huge learning experience, and got to grow even more in that role. So
Um, Now always have struck me as someone who, you know what you want to do, you're going to do it. Right? And even back then, right? And you knew this was a risk and you acknowledged that it was risk, but thought, hey, I'm still going to do it. Um, Talk more about that, because risk is hard, right? Especially when you are fresh in the market or don't have as much experience, or like even now, right? So there's multiple senior people, even in my own circle, and I'm sure in yours, that are still being burnt by the layoffs and the way the job market is and the flatlining of the tech industry. Um, where do you find the strength to just take that risk, especially in the space where you just said there wasn't anyone to learn from?
yeah, that's hard. That's a hard question. I mean, at the time, I think I felt more inclined to take a risk because I was younger, still new in my career, and I could still present I was still in a position of I don't know, like I'm here to learn, and that is, I think, younger people who are like earlier in their career, or even when you're pivoting into new roles or new careers, it's such a beautiful place, and I think everyone should take advantage of this of this wonderful zone of like, I don't know, I'm here to learn and be able to ask all your dumb questions and all that stuff just because you're like,
Yeah.
I'm new here. Um, I'm still figuring this all out. And the more you advance kind of like or move up in your career, the harder it becomes to say, I don't know
Okay, why
what's
don't you
going
know? You better know this.
on. Like you're expected to know some things.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know if that answers your question, but I, yeah, I think at the time I don't know how I would approach it now, but I
Hmm.
know at the time I was like, I'm still new, I'm still young. There's a lot of things I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I'm okay with taking on a lower, like quote lower role
Yeah.
than my current position because I know I will gain so much more. And I remember in the interview process when I was applying for this freelance production designer role, they even asked me, they were like, "What? Are you sure you want to come over here?" Because they saw my
Hmm.
resume and they were like, saw the fancy role I had, and they're like, "Why? Do you sure you want to come here and like do this?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely, yeah. Like, I want to work
Huh.
at an agency. I want to learn this
Yeah.
stuff." Um,
Okay. That's awesome. So you've got a lot of agency experience, and that is a whirlwind, right? I started my first full-time job out of college. Also had an agency, it was a boutique agency, but a lot of context switching. You're thrown in a lot of different directions. Fast forward to now, you're currently a lead designer where you do both visual and UX work, focused in the hospitality space, lodging specifically. And before this, because you've been at Google now for a little bit, you were a lead visual designer for the Google Cloud platform, focusing on design system and mobile apps.
mhm.
I want to really learn about your shift from more focus on visual to also incorporate UX. Is this new for you? Like the split focus, or have you always done UX work? Tell me about that.
Yeah, and in my agency world, I was primarily seen as a visual designer, and I was usually paired with a UX designer. Um, and we would be co-collaborators and work together on projects that required UX. Not all projects required that, but when they did, we were partnered up. And as I came into my role at Google, we again were paired up. I because I was hired on as a visual designer for cloud for Google Cloud, and I was paired up with a UX designer to work on projects together. And I could see I always had like a systematic approach to visual design, and I loved always loved having like a co-design partner so you could like do it together, um, ask the questions together, talk it out together, problem solve it together. But they weren't always available. And so I started
Hmm.
looking around at my other pure visual designers, and I was unfortunately watching them struggle because
Hmm.
they didn't always have the UX partner that they could go to, and they didn't necessarily have the skills to do the UX design work or interaction design work for what was asked of them. Um, and I started changing my role or selling myself, even within Google, as like a hybrid designer, that I was both UX and visual design, and that I could do both, and that would save us time, and would allow me to have more opportunities because I could see that as my UX, like my visual design, they just they just were having a harder time, unfortunately,
Hmm.
and there wasn't really a place for them. And since the work that we were asked to do or was required of us required a lot more UX work. And
Right.
not everyone has the same skill set. Some UX designers are just not very good at visual design,
Yeah.
uh, but most of the work that we were doing was UX, with like hints of visual. So
Yeah.
I started
Te-
realizing that I needed to like pick up a lot of those skills.
I see. Uh, Thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciate how you broke it down. You talked about how you started to position yourself, and uh, tell me a little bit more about how does somebody do that? Because obviously I have opinions on that as well, but I want to learn in a giant world of Google, how do you position yourself? Because it's so easy in big companies to get put in a box, and you clearly are more than just one box. How do you do that?
Um, I think I started changing the way I talked about the work that I was doing. I started um, kind of pushing myself into meetings that I might not have normally been a part of, or insisting that I should be uh, there earlier or sooner in the project than they might have planned for, just so that I could get more awareness of what's going on. And that's those are the times when you can start like putting in the UX insights or doing the UX work, and sharing your opinions, because visual design kind of almost comes at the end.
Yeah.
Uh, it's the like buttoning up, it's the cleaning up, it's the making sure everything's consistent and beautiful and um, seamless. But the UX work is like really where the dirty work is. It's the main problem solving aspect. And started selling myself as like I'm a problem solver and I'm here to um, just figure it out with the project managers and with the engineers. And so
It's
it just took time. Like it took time
got it.
to do that. I also at at Google we can sort of customize our roles or like change them on our profiles ourselves. And so I just sort of just
Um,
I was originally visual design and I just updated it to be UX as well. And that I think helped. Also, when I wanted to pivot or change teams, um, I made sure that my portfolio was a balance of both of UX, problem solving, critical thinking, as well as visual design um, aspects. So,
Got it. I really appreciate how deep you went into that because it's really hard to figure out how to think through this. And so, apart from the personal, hey, update your portfolio and all of that, you did some very tactical things like get invited to meeting, have an opinion, change your profile, like the visibility of it. And then there's also like knowledge sharing, right? Like, hey, I do have an opinion that's valid here. I'm just sort of
yeah.
hearing back what you're saying. I feel like what you're saying is you have to do all those things.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because you'd sort of find out that last week some people would they met, they had a meeting together, and then
Hmm.
you were like, "Well, I want to be in that meeting. Invite me
Yeah.
to that meeting. Like
Hmm.
next time you guys have it, like I want to be there."
Yeah.
Um, so you kind of unfortunately have to be a little bit pushier than you might be comfortable being. And I know that's a lot of like out of a lot of people's comfort zones, but if
Yeah.
you like your coworkers, if you appreciate their feedback, respect them, and hope that they respect you and appreciate you and your input, they'll have no problem adding you to these meetings. Um,
Hmm.
or be like, yeah, sure, come along, like no problem.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
weren't you there? And you want them to be like, why weren't you there? You should have been
Yeah.
there.
I feel like that's really solid advice and appreciate you saying that hey, sometimes it's just as simple as asking the question.
Yeah.
I'm going to steer us slightly in a different direction, still work related, but something I've known and really value about you is that you really appreciate your solo time, right? So, for instance, when you go somewhere, you always drive so that you can leave in your own time when you have to, when you need to. But at the same time, everything I've learned, just even in this conversation,
Who
you're
are
clear,
talking
you're clearly a highly collaborative designer, right? Which is so important to the design process. So here's my first question around this is it hard to juggle the need for personal time and also balance the level of collaboration, especially in the product design world that we live in today? Where to be successful, you have to collaborate, you have to go point to this person and talk to that person. How do you juggle that?
luckily majority of design work is a solo endeavor until you hit walls or you
Hmm.
feel like things are in a good place or your wheels are spinning or something just you're just like what am I doing or you've been staring at something for so long that you're like this is just nonsensical I need to show someone or I'm ready to share this or I need help or I need someone's input. um Design is inherently and should be well is always a collaborative process. The way
Yeah.
I was always a little annoyed with my university the way my university taught design was because they
Hmm.
sold it as a solo process, and it's
Ah.
100% not. It is
Yeah.
always a collaborative process. It is and it should be collaborative. Um, and it's helpful when it is because sometimes the people who you least expect it have some of the most insightful opinions or perspectives, and your job as a designer is to like take in that information, process it, and output it in some way if you find it relevant. Um, it, but yeah, no, I luckily like most of the time I spend in design is on my own, and then I sort of like come out of the whole
Hmm.
being like, please, does this? And my fear is always like, does this make sense? Please
Yeah.
look at like I like the way we work at Google is we like kind of make everything into a deck to tell the story of how we got there to like show the
Mhm.
work. So, because we don't always, it's not like here's the design, here's the end product, go build it. It's like it's that plus here's how I got there. Here's why. Here's the who. Here's the what. Here's the research. Here's the everything that goes with it. And it becomes this narrative story of like and you
Yeah.
want to make sure that this makes sense to people. You're like, you've been staring at it for so long. You've made the design and now you've made the story and you're
Yeah.
like, am I losing my mind? Am I creating a nonsensical mess? Like, so you'll like shop it around to you. Like, you'll like make your coworker sit next to you, and you'll like walk them through it. You're like, can I share my story with you? And hopefully you hope that they have time or patience or the bandwidth to just like look at something that doesn't relate to them at all, that they don't care about, that doesn't, matter to their work at all. And you hope that they'll take the time to just like tell you like, yeah, it doesn't make sense, does make sense, or I have a question, or "Well, have you thought about this or whatever." And that is like so helpful.
Yeah.
It's hurtful and it's helpful and um it's just a whole bag of stuff. I mean, it's you need the critical feedback. You just cannot
Yeah.
not
For
have it.
sure.
I mean,
Oh, for
designers
sure.
are very masochistic people. Like, you make something, and then you have to show it to people, and then they are allowed to give their opinions and insights and perspectives on it, no matter what it is. And most other art isn't that way. I mean, most artists, they make I mean, maybe art is more difficult to make because it's your feelings and your thoughts and your journey, and but this is like but it's not people's job to critique it. It's people's job to, like, maybe view your art and they, like, go, "Oh, I feel it, I understand it," or "Not for me." Whereas, like,
Yeah.
design is, like, functional. It is the most functional art. It's
Yeah.
used on people. If they don't get it, it's frustrating. It can impact their work or their life or their understanding of a subject.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a lot more responsibility. But
Yeah.
as I went on a huge tangent, sorry.
No, no,
But
no. Please don't be sorry because what you're talking about is the power of design, and it's so true. I actually literally wrote a piece about this just this past week, where design you can literally change so much for good and for bad, frankly,
mhm,
because you're putting these products out in the world that empower people to do so much, and there's so many unintended things that happen with something you might have designed. But
yeah,
going back a little bit to some of what you started to touch on was you really gave me a view into your creative process, especially at work. So for personal work versus, work, the work that pays our bills, um, is your creative process different for both those things? And if so, how?
Ye um, I mean, they're creative because they're completely different ventures. So, my work in design is an exercise in making sense or solving a problem. Uh, Whereas my creative work or my creative endeavors, I guess, are mostly solving a problem for myself, um, or an outlet for myself that I don't necessarily require the feedback or insight from other people. Like, I do occasionally do leather work and like make bags or make a chair or like, make a wallet or something, mostly out of like a need for something because I want to make it myself and I'll use it every day. Or I've gotten into my head some weird idea of how I want to make a chair. And so somehow manifest and figure that out, where I find a chair on the street that needs love. And so I take it home and I fix it. Um, or like painting, where I'm like, oh, I just want to, like, I need an outlet.
Hmm.
They're not necessarily for other people. Whereas like my work is for millions of people to use.
Yeah,
Um, and so yeah, the scale is very different.
makes sense. If you were to think about one thing that's really stood out to you about the work that you do um, in the last year, is would that be it? Like that this has impact on millions of people? Is that one thing that really stands out?
I try not to dwell on that aspect of my work too much. Um, it's both exhilarating and terrifying.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of pressure if you constantly think of how many people might use this or see this. Think I try to keep it more that I'm trying to solve a problem that as many people that I could imagine could use and make sense of, that it would benefit them versus what they have now, and make incremental improvements.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I try not to like get over it can be very overwhelming.
No pressure, right?
Mhm.
Um, Appreciate you saying that. I'm just digesting because it's true. When you think of, I almost have a freeze reaction myself when I think about the responsibility the work can carry, because that isn't something I think any designer should take lightly, because how you thread people through something can make a pretty significant impact, even if your main metric is delight them. But yeah, delight can mean something totally different depending on context.
Mhm.
Um, Before I shift focus again, I do want to talk a little bit about go dig deeper into work environments. You've been at a couple different companies, and even within your current organization, you've been in different teams. When you think about a team um, through your resume, not just where you are right now, that really stood out as exceptionally great to work with, who would you think about and why?
That's tough. Teams are really hard to create. Collaboration is uh it's a very difficult thing to manifest.
Yeah,
It doesn't always come naturally to a lot of you can't just like place a bunch of people onto a project and hope that they are going to collaborate effectively. Um,
yeah,
I have a very fond memories of my last job, being on embedded teams where we had one sole focus for one client, and you kind of were like almost at war together.
Hmm.
Um, and it created bonds between the different cross collaboration, the like designers and engineers and the project managers, and you just like create so much closeness between everyone because we were in it together to
Hmm.
solve this, to execute this, to complete this thing, um, at the behest of our client.
Right.
And I think that has been harder thing to create in the last few years, at where I'm currently at. There's hints of it, there's like whispers of it, but it isn't quite to the same intense degree that I
Hmm.
experienced it many years ago. And I do miss that a lot. Um, it was quite intoxicating. But I always hope like, oh, one day maybe it'll come again. Maybe they'll, some magically create some team or perfect combination of people will come together and we'll have that again. But
Yeah.
it feels very finite. I didn't know that it was a temporary thing, but I guess that's most things in life. But
Yeah. We got deep there, but it's so true that to find that perfect synergy, 'cause I've had a lot of different jobs, including running my own company and all that. But as I digest what you're saying, there's literally only two examples of where I've had really, really good synergy the way you're describing. And you're right. It's very precious and it doesn't always happen.
yeah, I mean, it's the intensity that you all have a goal, the same goal,
Yeah.
or the same enemy. Like, that's why I said, like, you're like
Yeah.
almost going to war together, or you're so close. It's like you went to war together because you have this common enemy that you're trying to win over or beat or please or whatever, that you're just like doing
Yeah.
whatever you can together to figure it out.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if like my current role now has like very strong aspects of that. We do have like a common, our users are our common thing, and we want to make sure that they are happy and get what they want, and are you achieve the goals that they have, but it's not at the same. It's more abstract.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Connected, but I'm sort of trying to try to thought over here, but connected, but like slightly shifting again. I want to think about learned experiences for a moment, right? Because you've obviously had a lot of experience. You've sent a lot of people to the work that you do, whether freelance or whether your own career pursuits or um, at an employed resume job, as I'll call it. And you're this multi-talented, creative individual who's a deep thinker. Can you talk a little bit about experiences, both positive and negative, that have shaped how you approach work and life?
Positive and negative experiences of how I've shaped work and life. I guess one of my like positive, I guess it's both positive and negative, is that one of my ethos is that there's no right design. There's only a design for right now. I'll say that
Mm-hmm.
again. There's no right design. There's only a design for right now. Um,
Hmm.
and that I think really speaks to the ethereal aspect of the internet, and product design and designing in an environment that's constantly changing and moving. And it's it's not it's no longer like we're not etching things in stone. They're not permanent. They're incredibly ethereal and evolving. And so we're designing things in a very like we're designing the ship as it's sailing away. It's sort of a bizarre like thing. But it requires you to both make the best decision that you can right now with the information you have and then let it go.
Hmm.
Um, and not get hung up on was it the right decision? Because it probably wasn't. and that's
Yeah.
okay. And you kind of have to like, it was the best decision you could make at that time. And I think that really like falls into life of like when you
Yeah.
make choices in life of like you can only make the best decision you can with the information you have at hand, and
Yeah.
you can't feel regretful for the decision that you should have made or could have made later down the line because you didn't have the same information.
Yeah. I
I
love
don't.
that. So hearing back what you're saying, what I'm really feeling over here is that think of it as a journey, because at the time and space, you probably did the best you could. And later, maybe it's disastrous, but you know what? You didn't mean it to be, or like maybe it needs to be iterated on, or whatever it might be. And I really
Yeah,
appreciate that sort of keep moving is what
yeah,
I'm
I
getting
think a
from
lot
that.
of designers put a lot of pressure on themselves to come up with the perfect right answer and the perfect right design for this
Mm-hmm.
problem, and that this is going to solve all of the, it's going to solve the problem completely. And they they just there's just so much pressure to put on yourself.
Yeah.
And when you live and work in the internet space, which is so always updating and moving and changing, and like there is no right answer.
Mhm.
And so taking that pressure off of yourself and saying, like, yeah, maybe it's not the best solution, but it's a solution that's working right now. And like, we can iterate on it, we can improve it, um, and we can design a system that accommodates that kind of stuff. But there is
Mm,
no, like, this is the right answer. It's always going to be the right answer, no matter what.
yeah.
And that's a lot, tons of pressure to
Yeah.
put on
No,
yourself.
no kidding. I want to bring the same theme sort of even closer to home. And what cover mind for me and from everything that you're saying is, look, when I think about my personal identity, I often stop and think about how I'm even thinking about myself. I'm struck by how much the way I conduct myself, the way choices I've made, my personal identity comes into that a lot. And my question for you is, as a person of color, identifying as a minority, or just being different from the majority, has that had an effect on how you work and live life?
Um, I think it has a little bit of an effect in the sense, um, that I'm because I don't know, I think visually and maybe in my thought process, it is a bit different than others. I try not to like separate myself from other humans, and think like I kind of have like a dialogue in my head that I'm no better or no more special than anyone else, and like the problems I have are not uncommon, and others have similar if not different problems of their own that they're worried about. um I lost my train of thought.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So if I hear that back, it's more like you try not to let personal identity get in the way of doing what you want to do. Like, and you
Yeah,
don't take for granted that everybody has their journey and story and stuff. We all have stuff as human beings.
yeah, we all have suffering in our own flavors.
Yeah.
And I think what I have found that benefits me in my work is that I grew up in mm, a very large family with a lot of strong personalities, and learned to navigate had to learn to navigate these strong personalities. And so I sort of have created a method of working with like working successfully with quote difficult people,
Hmm.
um, and finding like good collaboration with them where others may have not have been able to successfully collaborate with them. um, but I find that people with strong personalities or strong opinions or um, are not difficult. They are just trying to be heard, and
Hmm.
they that they have strong opinions about what they want. And maybe their methods of sharing those opinions or perspectives is not soft as like society expects it to be, or wants them to be. And I think having grown up in a very like strong personalitied family, um, I I have an easier time navigating those types of people. I don't take offense to them or take their directness personally, um, or pushiness as abrasive. I just sort of find it. They're familiar personalities, and I'm sort of I'm like okay, like I know what you're getting at, and I know what you're looking for, and I can help you out or figure it out with you. Um, so that's like part of like how my personal life has connected back into my work.
Yeah. It's where I'm quiet for a second because I'm yet again struck by how incredibly empathetic you are. Because when you grow up in certain situations, there's like fight, flight, or freeze, right? You reach you sort of freeze and like I don't know, you're a deer in headlights, or you're like run the fuck away, or do you fight and say fuck you? What do you mean? And you're looking at it with so much kindness and empathy, and I mean, I just wanted to take a minute to reflect that back at you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that so much.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I think it's like also a learned, you realize like after years of working in an industry, especially but design is an empathetic job. Like in
yeah,
itself, design is just an empathy job.
yeah,
Your job is to like put yourself in the shoes of another person or multiple other people and figure out what do they want or what do they
yeah,
need or what do they mean or like try to interpret abstract data and to make it
yeah,
real. So
absolutely.
I think design is just a job of empathy, and most
Hmm.
successful designers are incredibly empathetic people.
Yeah,
Have
yeah,
to be. So
yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna write that down. Design is a job of empathy. But it's so true.
yeah.
Um, going back to sort of not sort of going back to the identity question, there's something I also want to ask you around that. Zooming out, if you think about the larger design and also the tech community, what does it mean to you when you see representation of race, gender, identity, all the things? Like I'm thinking about like when you walk into a room and you see none, or when you walk into a room and you see a lot. What does that mean to you, and how does it make you feel?
I mean, I would love to see more diversity in design. I think um, region is the having worked in the Bay Area versus having worked in New York. Um, there's very different demographics of who I work with, and the people that I do see around. Um, New York is a very diverse place, and
Yeah,
attracts a lot of diverse people and opinions and perspectives. And um, it's nice to be able to see that at work or in your day-to-day life. It can only benefit you and it can only benefit your work.
yeah.
um, but yeah, I don't know if I have like very solid opinions or perspectives on that otherwise. It's a
Oh,
difficult
that's
it's
plenty
hard, yeah,
solid.
for me to answer.
Oh, that's fair. Um, in your opinion, before we switch gears again, I want to ask you, where are we as an industry? I'm thinking specifically not just US, but the design community when it comes to product design and all of that. Where are we now, in your opinion, in terms of being truly diverse and inclusive as an industry?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm not as connected to the design community as I probably should be or could be. Um, I think I think design is such a wonderfully as being a empathetic job. Um, I think there's so many opportunities to attract new generations of designers. that you don't have to do the like Bauhaus route or the UX, route, that there's a lot more diversity in like the way you're educated. And I think like not having to get you don't have to get a degree. Like I think having the whole gatekeeping of design behind you need a BA or a BFA. I think that's bullshit. And I'm really happy
Yeah.
to see these boot camps, these UX or design boot camps, because it really creates or it gives the opportunity to people to jump into design who might not have thought about it or considered it or had the opportunity to go to a 4-year university.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that that brings in more diverse groups of people with, more diverse
Yeah.
backgrounds and, more diverse thought. Um, yeah, because like I think when I was going to school, it was maybe I think or like when I started my design career, it was very much like there was a one way that designers looked. It was very
Yeah.
like they've got this one look and you can always tell it's a designer from like a mile away and like it was just like their demographic. It was also like the way they dressed and the way, their how they did their hair or whatever it was. But now I think it's growing and diversifying in a way that I think can only benefit the industry.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you pulling that apart because I'm completely with you. Like, there's just the removing the requirement for this degree or that degree, which also removes some of the all of the unconscious bias that comes with. Or a lot of recruiters do, right? Like they select people who went to certain schools, and those certain schools recruit people from certain places. It removes all of that in such a clean sweep. So I love what you're saying there. Um, digging a little deeper, you were giving some really solid advice. I mean, through this conversation, you've given some really advice, but right now you were just talking about different paths to entry. And so when we think about a piece of advice you might share with people entering the field for the first time, what might you say?
Oof, that's hard. Take on junior roles, apply for freelance or contract roles, work on a portfolio that tells a story, not just showcase what you made, but talk about how and why you made it this way. I think that helps recruiters get a lot of insight into your the way you think, and the way you think is much more valuable than like how talented or quote like skilled you are at design. Um I think the last aspect is like trying to have no ego around your designs or around your work. Uh because design is a collaborative sport. Um and it's something that we all use every day. People have opinions and perspectives, and you can't get hung up on your solutions or thinking that your design is the best versus someone else's or someone else's opinion, um, and being open to other people's opinion. Like, it's also really hard to work with people who have very strong egos or want to be rock star designers. There is a place for that. There's always a place for a rock star designer. Um, but if you really want to be successful or get jobs or be asked to come back, um, not having an ego is going to benefit you more. Being collaborative is going to benefit you more. Being open is going to benefit you more than having like the highest level of design skills. I mean,
Yeah.
no one wants to work with an asshole. So,
I've got,
like,
I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. No one wants to work like an asshole. It's true.
they don't. Like, I mean, design is a learned skill. It's a
Yeah.
lifelong learned skill. You're never going to be the best designer ever. I mean, some people are just extremely talented and they're really good at what they do, but they're also always learning and evolving and will just continue to get better.
Yeah.
We can all continue to get better, but um, it's not a ego sport. It's a
Yeah.
collaborative sport. So
Thank you for that. You're absolutely right. In this team, is there anything specifically you might call out for underrepresented communities?
in this which team?
In this team of advice for folks entering the field, is there anything that you would specifically and particularly call out for folks separately for underrepresented communities?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. That's a hard question. I don't know how to answer that. How would I,
You
what
know,
would I,
you know me with my questions. I don't softball any of them.
you what?
I don't softball any of them, do I?
No, I know. I don't expect it. I so wait, can we rephrase it in a different way with the question
Yeah.
in a different
So
way?
you have a lot of solid advice, right? Like from keeping your, like for example, keeping your inner critic in check. And I think you named your inner critic Sylvia. Did I get that right? From
Think
keeping like your inner voice in check to like not having an ego to being collaborative. There's lots of really, there's a lot of gems in this conversation that I found. So when you think about advice you want to give to other designers, especially folks entering the field for the first time, through all of this, is there something you would really highlight for folks who are underrepresented? Because look, the fact of the matter is, it is a lot harder if you um, have a certain background or look a certain way or have a certain name. Lots of times there is unconscious bias, even unconscious bias. So if you
Mhm.
were to give advice for someone entering the field who belongs in an underrepresented community, um, what might you say to them?
Oh, that's hard. This might be controversial, but uh, it, try not to take things personally or rejection personally. It might be personal,
Mhm.
but how you interpret that rejection is more important than the rejection itself. So if you apply for a bunch of jobs and you assume that you're not getting them because of people's biases towards you, then you're only setting yourself up for, you're only hurting yourself by
Mm,
making that assumption, whether it's true or not.
yeah,
Um, but
that's powerful.
as like tangible,
I think
actionable,
that's really tangible because I've seen people get tangled in taking it personally, and
yeah,
it's not a reflection on you, is what I'm hearing. It's a reflection on them. Like, move on from the bullshit.
sure,
Don't
yeah,
internalize it. Is what I'm getting
yeah.
from that, and that's very powerful.
Everyone experiences rejection or perceived rejection. Um, and it could be for a million reasons, and none of those reasons are you.
Yeah,
Um, so how you internalize that struggle is only negatively affects you. As far as like tangible, actual action, yeah, I don't know what else. That's what came to mind right now.
no,
Something else.
that's huge. I think that's actually more tangible than you're thinking. It's true. Like I said, I see people freeze. Just in earlier years, I did too. Before I like, you know what, this is their problem, not mine. Um, okay. In this team, I have just one other question for you. So when I say holding the door for future designers, what does that mean for you?
Supporting younger designers as they come up in their career. Um, I think, sometimes I work with designers who are still in their first few years, um, or haven't been working as long as I have, or or as many places as I have. We could be at the same level, but still supporting their advancements over my own ego or my desires of what I want for myself, I think is important and necessary, you know? Um,
Yeah.
it's I think everyone it deserves encouragement and needs encouragement in their careers, at any age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And holding the door open, I think is like to put my ego aside and support those who are doing good work or doing the best they can or coming up in their own careers. And and if they surpass me, cheer them, be supportive of that, be excited for them. We're all in like very different paths,
Yeah.
and not comparing yourself to others is super important. But I don't know, I think I see it just as like just being supportive of them, trying to show up for them and help out where you can.
That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. Okay, we're getting to the end here, and I have just two more questions for you.
Ooh, more questions.
First, so tell me, are there trends in design and tech that you're excited about right now?
If there are, I don't know what they are.
That's perfectly fine.
I
Well,
know it.
sir,
I like feel like I'm in such a
you're in the
design
hot seat.
bubble, like I don't know. I wish I was more involved, and maybe I need to start getting more involved in like design community or design theory or the future of design. I it's hard to it's hard to answer that because I'm just in a very like unusual bubble at work where our focus areas
Yeah.
are so specified, and so I don't get out much in a way. You're like,
Yeah, no, that
uh,
makes sense. It also is interesting to learn about, like, hey, when you work in a large organization, what that means. So thank you
yeah,
for being so candid about that.
yeah,
Okay, so that said, I want to acknowledge that working in tech, it's hard, man. It's so many things. And to your point, right? You're doing your thing, but you also have to be aware of all of these other things and best practices, and stuff is always changing. Accessibility standards are always changing.
mhm.
So all of that said, acknowledging that working in tech is hard. What keeps you going?
What do I see?
What keeps you going?
What keeps me going? I think trying not to get overwhelmed by it all. That
Hmm.
was a long lesson. That's only possible by practice. So I think in the beginning of my tech career, uh, I felt a lot of pressure to keep up with everything, to make sure everything was, up to tier, and like that I
Hmm.
like was read every document and understood everything, and like, I think I think now I've gotten much better about relinquishing a bit of control and accepting that I'm doing the best that I can, um, and that's okay. Um,
Good for you.
I can't have all the answers. It's impossible for me to have all the answers, and that's a lot of reason why I
Yeah.
like lean on others for help or asking questions or getting feedback, because I don't know what I don't know, and there's always going to be holes in what you've created or what I've created, and that like I might not see them.
Hmm.
Um, so it's part of just saying it's part of the journey, accepting that that will be part of the journey, and not beating myself up about not hitting every bullseye, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For sure. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed learning so much more about you and your process. I really appreciate how candid and generous you've been with just everything you know.
thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for
Oh,
doing
for
this with
sure.
me.
Thanks for listening to the UX Ladder, Conversations Beyond Pixels, created by Mariam Khan, music by Ben Ewing.